Snow has a way of teaching a man how quiet his heart can become when no one is left to hear it. I tell this story now as someone older, slower, softened by years that have worn down the sharp edges of memory but never erased them. That Christmas still lives in me like a breath held too long, a sound that refuses to fade. Chayton Cole was 30 that winter, though the land had already taken more from him than most men lose in a lifetime. His cabin stood alone at the edge of the territory, built from stubborn logs, calloused hands, and a belief that solitude was safer than hope. Snow wrapped the world in white silence, pressing down on the trees, the earth, and every small thing that dared to move. The sky was heavy and low, as if listening, holding its breath, waiting for something that had yet to come. Inside the cabin, a single candle burned at the center of a rough pine table meant for 4. Its flame wavered each time the wind pressed against the walls, unsure whether it wanted to remain alive. Chayton sat with his hands folded over the worn surface, staring at a plate of beans and salt pork that had gone cold hours ago. Christmas had passed quietly in town, laughter hidden behind doors, families drawn together by warmth and memory. Out here, there was only the creak of the logs, the slow murmur of the fire, and the sound of snow settling like a promise no one had asked for. He told himself he preferred it this way. He told himself that solitude was lighter than loss, yet his eyes betrayed him, lifting again and again toward the door, as if hoping for a contradiction that would never arrive. Once long ago that cabin had known other sounds. Boots by the door that were not his. A voice calling his name without urgency. Hands reaching for him in the dark not out of fear, but because they trusted he would still be there in the morning. The West had taken those things without explanation as it always did. Fire, fever, distance, grief, it hardly mattered which. By the time winter settled in, Chayton had learned not to expect mercy from seasons or people. Still, on that night, something restless stirred in his chest, a knot that habit could not untangle, a memory that refused to stay buried. He wondered, perhaps for the first time in years, if the world still held small kindnesses that had not yet been claimed by frost and time. The knock was so soft he almost ignored it. At first he thought it was the snow slipping from the roof, another sound the night liked to invent. But it came again, barely there, and his heart caught in his chest. He stood slowly, as if sudden movement might shatter what little courage remained inside him, and opened the door. The darkness stood there shaped like a woman, snow clinging to her hair and shoulders as if she belonged to it. She did not step forward. She did not smile. She only looked at him with eyes that had learned caution too early in life, eyes that weighed everything before trusting a single soul. Then she spoke, softly, almost as if afraid of the cold itself. "Can you buy cookies?" She could not have been more than 22. Her clothes were thin but clean, patched in ways that spoke of care rather than wealth. Her long dark hair was braided neatly, without adornment, tied back by her own hands and patience. Hunger rested lightly on her face, but she carried it with dignity, as though it were private and not to be offered freely. Her name was Adsila Running Deer, though Chayton would not know it until later, and she stood there as if prepared to be turned away. Something inside him shifted then, not dramatically, not with romance or heroics, but with recognition, as though he had been waiting for someone like her all his life. He nodded once and stepped aside, letting the warmth of the cabin spill out to meet her, though he feared she might mistake it for something he could not offer. Inside she ate quietly, never taking more than she needed. Her hands were steady, her movements deliberate, as if she had learned long ago that drawing attention could cost more than it gave. Chayton watched without staring, noticing how she held herself upright even in fatigue, how she thanked him without lowering her eyes, how she did not apologize for existing. The fire crackled. The kettle whispered. For a moment the cabin remembered what it had been built to do, to shelter, to witness, to keep secrets safe. When she finished, she brushed crumbs from her hands, said thank you again, that simple word carrying the weight of restraint, pride, and a history he could not yet understand. Then she stepped back into the snow before he could summon the courage to ask her name. The door closed and the cabin felt emptier than before. Chayton stood there, listening to the void she left behind, realizing too late the question he should have asked first. He stepped outside, boots sinking into the drift, calling her name without a sound. Snow erased her footprints with a merciless ease, reminding him how easily people disappear when no one holds their place. He stayed there long enough for the cold to seep through his coat, to remind him of everything he had lost, everything he had nearly forgotten, and everything he still hoped might be reclaimed. Days followed, slow and relentless, stretching pale and unforgiving into one another. The memory of her lingered like smoke, thick in the corners of his mind. He found himself listening for footsteps that never came, replaying her voice until it became almost more comforting than the fire. In town he asked questions he pretended were casual. He lingered too long at the market, pretending interest in tools he did not need, stopping by the trading post again and again, watching faces, reading eyes. Some men smirked at his persistence. Some women looked away, uncomfortable with the quiet longing in his gaze. A few spoke in hushed voices of a native girl selling biscuits along the old toll road. Each word was fragile, easy to break, yet he followed them all, drawn forward by something neither fear nor reason could explain. Adsila stood by that road each morning before dawn had fully released the night. Her small wooden cart bore the weight of survival, its wheels worn, its surface dusted with flour and frost. She baked her biscuits by firelight, hands cracked, red and raw from cold and labor, refusing to complain. Pride, she had learned, was not loud. It was simply the decision to stand when sitting down would have been easier, the choice to meet the day despite everything against her. Customers were few. Judgment came often. Still, she endured, measuring her worth not by the eyes that passed her, but by the strength it took to remain upright, unbroken, unwilling to vanish without reason. When Chaitin finally found her, the world seemed to pause around them. Recognition passed between them without ceremony, without relief, without surprise. He bought every biscuit she had, pressing coins into her palm without explanation, as if apologizing for the cold, for the waiting, for his silence. She hesitated, then asked his name, and when he answered, the sound of it seemed to settle in the air, returning it to its rightful place. The snow continued to fall, larger, softer, blanketing the ground in something that felt less like emptiness and more like a promise. The storm worsened as afternoon leaned toward evening. Snow thickened until the road blurred into uncertainty. Chaitin offered her shelter carefully, choosing his words as if they could bruise her if mishandled. He left room for refusal, knowing how easily kindness could become a cage. Adsila studied him, eyes steady, weighing every intention, every possibility, every small word that might be untrue. Finally she nodded once and he led her to the cabin. The walls seemed to open wider for her, the fire leapt more eagerly. Blankets were laid with care, and tea simmered gently on the stove. Silence returned, but it no longer felt empty, it felt shared. Days folded into one another. The world shrank to the rhythm of small acts. Adsila mended a tear in his coat without being asked. Chaitin fixed the wheel of her cart while she watched quietly, offering no praise because none was needed. He learned her name and its meaning, Blossom, and marveled at how something so delicate could survive winters this cruel. They spoke little of the past but learned much of each other through gesture, through the shared warmth of a cabin that remembered how to keep hearts safe. Trust grew slowly, not announced but earned, measured in coffee poured without question, biscuits baked for him, and the small gentle turning of days. The town noticed, as towns always do. Concern arrived disguised as advice, judgment softened just enough to pretend kindness. Chaitin felt it in the way voices lowered when he entered a room, in the careful glances of strangers. Adsila felt it too, and one night she packed her things with practiced efficiency, choosing departure over becoming a burden. When Chaitin tried to stop her, words failed them both, fear stepping into the space where hope had been growing. And yet he did not give up. He asked her to stay, not as rescue, not as charity, but as a partner, as someone whose life and dignity he respected fully. He offered marriage not as possession, but as shelter freely given. Adsila listened, eyes unwavering, and said it would only be right if done properly, with honor for both their worlds. Outside, snow fell heavier as if the sky itself leaned in to hear. The ceremony was small, beneath a winter sky that understood restraint. Traditions were woven carefully, neither erased nor overshadowed. There was no excess, only intention. When they stood together, something settled in them both, shoulders straightening, breath deepening, hearts leaning quietly toward each other. The snow did not stop, but it softened, as though acknowledging the work it had taken to arrive at this moment, the patience, the courage, the silent understanding that love is earned as much as it is found. Years have passed since then. I tell this story not because it was extraordinary, but because it was made of ordinary courage, small choices, quiet persistence, and the willingness to open a door when nothing promised to be on the other side. If you listen closely, you might still hear it, the hush of falling snow, the faint scrape of boots on timber, and the soft knock that asks whether you will answer. Some knocks carry nothing. Others carry everything. It is up to the heart to know the difference.